as if they're shaking it like kacha, 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 kacha. Then it stops like kachu. And me, I still had a program like I had to be here at the time that I wanted to be here because I wanted to prepare for you. So I had to think, what am I going to do? Do I jump out? You know, it is okay to, when it's raining and you're wearing a t-shirt, it's okay for you to jump on a judge, or more so even walk call. If you're wearing the way I'm dressed, things get a little bit tight. It is not the same as when you're just wearing a t-shirt, I swear. It is far different when you take a judge. It becomes much more heavier and you actually just look a bit stupid. So I had to first put off my jacket and then I put off a bus coat. And I am very sure, as vibrant as I know them, we cannot let them down out of when they share the information they have or the interaction that we'll be having. It's our intention that at the end of this particular conference, there's some people that are rapporteuring, and this information is going to be compiled and used for betterment. So your contribution, as much as possible, will be a good thing for you to do. So here we are on a lovely day, beautiful day, I would like to believe. And when Mango came through the lift, he told me that he wanted to pray for us as we start before we say anything. He positioned himself and he said, yesterday you ignored me about so many things. Today, I start a prayer. So for anything that goes wrong today, either when the prompter goes off, it's your fault. When the internet is slow, it's your fault. When the food delays, it will be your fault. So please.
I'm cutting across actually. Let's bow and we pray. Heavenly Father, this morning, we want for the gift of life. We want to thank you for the gift of wisdom. We are gathered here today for a justified cause. Father, it was planned that we're going to be here on this day to discuss pertinent issues that regard our profession, and we shape it for the betterment of all other people, and we better our profession in the future. As we discuss, Father, give us wisdom, give us the spirit of sharing, such that at the end of the day, what we deliver here comes out fruitfully and changes the social transformation of this society. We pray all this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you very much. Thank you indeed. Anyone else wants to pray if you are not satisfied? We can do that anytime. Eh? Anyone wants to do that? Are they satisfied? Everyone is satisfied. Thank you indeed for that. And I would like to once again welcome you to day 2 of our conference, the Uganda Media Week 2021. And we run under the theme Navigating Obstacles in Uganda's Journalism. And this is a very huge theme that we have to tackle from all different angles and directions with a lot of care so that we can have some results. If at all you are in the room and you'd like to access Wi-Fi, also internet, the username is media, the password is media. It's also written just across there on the board, media. Username media, password is media. Our friends who are online, we would like to welcome you. Thanks very much for joining us. For individuals who have already joined in from Zoom, it's a pleasure to have you here. It's a full house here, and it's also like a full platform. I can see Watum Francis, also Aine Mbabazi, Munira Siwed, also Nigel Magum, Niwamanya, Douglas, Oscar M., Amole Daniel. It's amazing. Please, you are welcome to the platform as well. Let's have a swell moment. Let's have a good moment. Let's not only, really talk about things that affect us, but also talk about things that take us through a lot of progress. Let's go also to all our social media platforms, and we ensure that we share the content that is going to be used this morning and more so this afternoon and in the evening. Look out for all our platforms. They are very, very active. We are using various hashtags, including Uganda Media Week 21. Also hashtag Media Week 21. Just pick up on that. And also look out for Media Matters UG. Those are the three hashtags that we are using. We are streaming live on YouTube. Pick up on the link and you share it with your friends in your WhatsApp groups and more so to individuals in your WhatsApp groups so that they also pass on the message. You can also pick a link from YouTube, drop it on your Facebook, share it wherever you can be able to share it, more so on your Twitter handles. And the YouTube page is Media Focus on Africa. Just pick up on that. On Facebook, we are working with Media Focus on Africa as well. You can look out for the same. Twitter, the handle is as MFA Uganda, at MFA Uganda. MFA is in caps. Uganda, just pick up on that and let's have a good time, and also let's pass on all the information that is going to be shared here. It's okay, you are allowed to go ahead and share this information. It's at your disposal. As we start this morning, I would like to greet you once again. Welcome to the Media Week. My name is Sean Chimuli. I was made popular yesterday here by a lady called Mong. Mong kept on pairing me with a lady called Esther here. She kept on saying every time, Sean and Esther, Sean and Esther, Sean and Esther. Even when I went back home, I was like, it's like, this Esther, was she given to me directly, and I just didn't, react. When we were in school, they used to say when you don't react to certain things, "No, your guy Dofi." So I went back home and I'm like, why? Those things happen. But there we are. Lots of individuals came through yesterday to speak. Some of I could be able not to remember, but at least there were some remarkable things that came through out of these individuals that made their marks. When we went about the first day of yesterday, we tackled a couple of issues, including challenges facing journalism today. Emily Marashall came through, and also we had a discussion on building resilience and quality journalism. We talked about strategies for media viability through agenda mainstreaming, innovators and technology for media viability, collaborative journalism, strengthening networks across a newsroom, and so much more. We had an open discussion at the end of the day. Let me welcome a lady called Ruth Nagudi, and kindly come forth. She's here to give us a quick recap of some of the issues that we discussed yesterday as we kickstart this morning. We should be also running after time as much as possible. Ruth? Let's put our hands together as we welcome Ruth, please. She said loud that, I have never heard someone say that.
Good morning. I'm not hearing you again. Good morning. Ah, that's better. In the interest of time, I don't think we are going to have a recap of yesterday. We have a very strong program today with very long panels for different reasons here and there. But what we are going to do, I think we shall just get into Tabu's session. I understand Shoda had some questions for me for that particular part.
The only question I have for you is, what happened yesterday?
Oh my goodness. I really wish I could escape that. I would rather throw it back to the audience because they were here yesterday and they are the ones who know what they took home from the different discussions we had here. I had what I took home, but I want to, it would be nice to hear what everybody else went away with. So, Shod, I really request that we just get into table session. Time.
I think it will be right for us to pick up a few notes from what we had from yesterday. And in particular, I'll be able to do that if you find it a little bit hard.
I'm not finding it hard. I'm looking at the time.
Anyone recalls a particular moment of some of the notes that we picked yesterday, that we shared yesterday from particular speakers? Any highlights? Mwabyerabidde byonna.
You might have to hand pick.
So you just have to do it by force. You said some of you were doing what? From yesterday's event, what was your highlight?
You could just speak from there.
Oh, okay, can speak from here. I'm loud.
Yeah.
Mine was about collaboration. I think this is the session we last had. Collaboration, where media have to work together to make sure that they develop together through everything they're doing. It's not. It's one journey. You're all aiming at. Almost the same objective. Informing people, educating people, entertaining, and yeah, the same thing. So I think if collaboration is really given, if it's given a chance to happen, the media will grow and we shall see development, we shall see everything move on very well. That's what I noted for me. It's a key, and we have not been doing that in Uganda. So I was also wondering why we are not doing it, and Solomon brought it very clearly, as if we are competing. So also Joseph said that the reason why maybe collaboration is not happening, that the reason why collaboration is not happening because different media houses have different agendas and they have different objectives. They have reasons why they came up, so they cannot work together at the same point. I don't know how maybe they can come together. Also, I'm still wondering maybe if we could have another discussion about that, maybe. I don't know. Thank you.
Actually, I wanted to supplement on what he said. I so much liked what Joseph also talked about towards the end of his discussion. Understanding how to collaborate with the kind of people you need to collaborate with, and not forgetting that there is still competition between the different media houses that do exist in the country. So he highlighted it quite well that collaboration between the top media houses might be a bit difficult, but understanding who you are working for, and how you can get to working with the different media houses, especially those working up country, the size and the vision of the different media houses, and how they could work together from top to bottom, and how to share information from one media house to another. Chankole Denyo.
Thank you very much. I was able to take home media viability through the different lenses like gender, technology, and all these other, what the speakers talked about. And of course, it gave a foundation, and also that fear that COVID has brought so many challenges. But like we had the team that had Fat Boy and others, where they said, even when things were bad, they rose up from the ashes and have started something. So that was so great for me.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to today's session. What stood out for me from yesterday's discussion was something that Barbara Among said. She said that entrepreneurship in newsrooms by journalists is inevitable. And it's something that, as practitioners, it's something we need to think about. How can we stay afloat with the fact that payments in the newsroom are not the best, how can we stay afloat, do something that we love, but still earn money from it?
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
What stood out for me was the urge and encouragement, the panel that talked about women engagement in media presented, most especially about doing away with fragile thinking or always pitting oneself, but rather grabbing the opportunities and taking whatever opportunity, grabbing the opportunities and having the courage that you can do whatever the other gender can do.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much indeed. I think that's it. We might leave it to that. I will be having a working breakfast at a later stage, but as we proceed right now, let's go to one of our first stations as our discussion rotates about accountability in journalism road to 2026, tracking the political pledges. Well, this will be in one way or the other coming through with a proper understanding from a gentleman who has a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge. He's had a lot of access to information, and we're following up on particular issues. Accountability is not a very easy thing to go about. We always forget about things that have happened, yet in one way or the other, we can be able as journalists take it up as something that is our responsibility. Kindly put your hands together as we do welcome from the Nation Media Group is the managing editor in Uganda, Tabu Butajira. As he moves forth, let's put our hands together. Sir, thank you very much for joining us as we've been anticipating the same. I think we can do a better round of applause.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tabu Butajira, and I pretend to work as the managing editor at the National Media Group Uganda. And in that capacity, I oversee news gathering operations for the Daily Monitor newspaper and NTV and the two sister FM radio stations, Dembe and KFM. I'm not used to holding the mic, but somehow it has been decreed upon me to use it. Nonetheless, I will try to. And when Jan called me, I didn't receive her phone call because I thought she was trying to make an appointment for our wine date, which was 1 year ago. Now, I missed 2 phone calls, and eventually when I picked it, she said, I need to come and talk. And usually she likes grabbing me at the last minute, and I think, I don't know what the reason is. And then when they gave me a program, they said, we'll be here, 3 of us, my mentor, and for many of you who may not know, Alex Atwaire. He was the news editor at the Monitor, and he held my hands fairly firmly, which is probably why I'm here, and he's there. And then there was supposed to be Mildred to Haise. And so that session should have started at 9:15 and ended at 10 with breakfast. And when I check the clock now, I think we are a 1/4 or so. And I presume that my presentation is finished because I also had another appointment for which I needed to go at 11. So I could as well stop here. But that said, the question that presents itself, at least in this presentation for me, in terms of how it's been framed by the organizers, is accountability journalism, road to 2026, tracking the political pledges. I thought maybe it is important, just by way of mapping our views about this, to ask this question: what do we understand by accountability journalism, or the lack thereof? And I'll go table by table. On this desk, can I have a volunteer just on what we understand to be accountability journalism? Yes? Putting the audience or clients first. This group of editors, what is our practice or understanding of accountability journalism?
And I would understand it as journalists that seeks to ask tough questions of the people in power and try to scrutinize what they have promised and whether they have achieved it, but also one that gives the ordinary people a voice in issues of public policy, and that's how I would take it. I would understand.
All right. Go for it.
Accountability journalism in our context, in the current context, I would think that it is journalism that tracks public interest agenda-setting issues.
Okay. Right. John, you know, this gray beard is not for nothing. I have a daughter in the newsroom, and she's here in the room as well. John, how are you doing? Yeah, what do you understand to be accountability journalism?
Accountability journalism, I imagine it is the kind of journalism whereby we are responsible for the news stories that we air out, or we can be able to defend whatever we put out there when we are asked the tough questions, like someone said.
Okay. On this desk, which is not gender balanced, because there are a lot more women here than there are men.
I think accountability journalism, adding on to what others have said, is authentic journalism, like having authentic stories and tracking them.
Okay, good. Here I don't know what table number. Maybe, Jan, in the future you need to put table numbers. So we will say table number 6.
Hello. Good morning. My name is Hannington Mutabazi.
Accountability journalism.
Accountability journalism. I think accountability journalism is tracking back to political pledges or pledges that have been made to fulfill certain things. For example, if there's a pledge that we're going to
that be responsible for their pledges, but also their responsibilities and tasks and obligations.
Right. All right. Yeah, sure.
In my own understanding, I think it is giving justification for whatever has been either promised or is yet to be done.
Right.
On different sides, the stakeholders, maybe those ones in power, and the people or the audience that we serve.
Good. Jan, I should tell you, this is the most active group I've ever spoken to. That everyone is actually very engaged with the subject. Yes, someone else was. I am very impressed, like really impressed. That I think you made a good selection.
My understanding is holding the powerful to account. Those who have been given resources, how do we make them to account? But also, as a journalist, how do you account for your time and what you do?
Right. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
All right. To me, I wanted to put it in simple terms. This is supposed to be done and not done. Right. And someone is asking, why isn't it done? You promised this, it's not done. Why are you not delivering on the promises you made? Thank you.
Very good. Okay.
Thank you so much. Among the 7 principles of journalism is accountability. So when we are talking about accountability professionally in the media, we are looking at, okay, let me start with the sources. These people give us information, and there is a role that we're supposed to play at the media. Are we playing our role? If we are playing our role, we go out there, we collect information, and we come and we air it, and something is out there, then we are accountable. Because if a road has maybe potholes, and the journalist cover the story, and the road is worked on, we are being accountable. And the sources will say, yes, you are accountable, because that's your role as a media. So that's accountability journalism.
All right. Okay, Adude. I know you come from Entebbe, but you should have got the chopper from the president to fly in here on time. When I was invited, I was told that I'm coming to speak to senior journalists. And so I can understand from the line of engagement that obviously there's impact of our work wherever we are. So I will borrow from two definitions, two scholarly definitions. Many years ago, I didn't know that there was a specific tribe of journalism called accountability journalism. But when I was at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University, one of the course units was actually accountability journalism. And the teacher is one man called Len Downey. Some of you may have heard that name before. He was the former executive editor of the Washington Post. And so he and two others authored a book and tried to render a definition of what accountability journalism is. And the book is titled The New Media, What Everyone Should Know. The New Media and What Everyone Should Know. It's by Len, Anderson, and Skadson. And they say accountability journalism encompasses traditional investigative reporting, but much more. I underline that, but much more. It includes fact-checking, political speeches, digging into digital data, and aggressive beat coverage to reveal as much as possible about what is really going on in every aspect of, they put American society, but I'll knock out the American and just say society. So that's one working definition, at least from a scholarly perspective. The second is from the American Press Institute, and it is that accountability journalism is work that encompasses, and they use the same word, fact-checking, explanatory and investigative reporting, but more generally applies to journalistic work of holding the powerful accountable. So I had before, of course, the notion of holding the powerful to account. And I'll ask a question for which I don't require a particular answer, that is it necessary also to hold the powerless accountable, right? So that is the question I'm going to pose, that in our working definition of accountability journalism, and indeed of our journalism, is it possible that we don't fashion this as binary conversation, which is the powerful against the powerless, right? And so that being said, let me now progress just to sort of simplify this whole concept in our social dimensions. Who in this newsroom, in their social dimensions, have accountability partners that either in their career or in their social life or in their scholarly life, they have people who hold them accountable? 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 4 people who have accountability partners. So what this essentially means is that most of it is either because of long time of friendship or because of biological relation. And then you commit to do certain things with your life. You'll say, in 3 years, I should have got my undergraduate degree, right? In 5 years, I want to start up a business. I should have my own plot after 3 years after starting work. Or I'm going to build a house, I'll move out of rent and build my house in 10 years, right? And then someone else somewhere who is your friend and can leverage will actually be following you and say, this is what you promised, how much money have you saved for this, right? It's now 1 year to when you promised the house will be ready. At what stage of the construction are you, right? So they'll be asking you those questions, right? So that's a simpler way of looking at it. But I think every answer which was rendered here is correct in terms of what accountability would mean. This particular segment is dedicated to tracking political promises, right? But accountability can also be a lot more diverse. And somebody mentioned the issue of roads. I think the gentleman at the back raised the issue of potholes. One of the most stunning protests, which also provided good journalism, was about potholes, I think somewhere in Russia. So the mayors had made promises in terms of how the roads would look like if they were voted. And indeed, they were voted. And so when they got to office, potholes developed. And when people reported about potholes, they decided to make noise and shut up people. Some clever folks then went and shaped the heads of those mayors around the potholes and said, you know, this is what you promised, and now this is how you look like on the road. The next day, the guys came there and covered. The guys did it again. Then, actually, they brought all the machinery they could and sealed all the potholes, right? So holding people to account with a bit of mischief and art, and to work very effectively. But in our case in Uganda, there are different strands of accountability journalism that we try to do, and I'll use the examples of National Media Group, or indeed Monitor, where I am more familiar. The last week, we just finished up 1 year anniversary series for people who were killed in the November 2020 riots. And the questions we were asking is, it's now a year. First of all, we got a copy of the government investigations report into the killings, which they had shelved from the time they completed this on 5th December to when we were actually able to get it. And in it, of course, they said that the people who were shot, who were identified as rioters, out of the 54, were 8. On November 29, 2020, when the president addressed the nation, he said 34 of the people who were killed were rioters. 34. The government's own report actually says 8. 39 people were shot, quote unquote, by stray bullets. 39 out of 54, stray bullets. 2, I think, were run over by cars. The others were described as shot by LDUs, 2. One of them was actually an LDU. So we asked the question, accounting for the lives lost, right? Where is the justice? 1 year of waiting, no justice, no compensation. The narrative, the official narrative has changed. The findings of the police have invalidated the president's initial claims. So where is the justice? 1 year later. So trying to hold power to account. The first day we ran the story on Monday. Last week, everyone in state thought they could call and intimidate and stop us from running the series and all those kind of things. They were luckily unsuccessful, and we were able to do them. And I thought that this type of reporting will then give basis for human rights lawyers to go to court and say, look here, this is what you said had happened. This is what your own investigations reveal. So who is accountable for the shootings? Holding people to account by keeping alive the most important things that matter, one of which was the November riots. The other was something which we did, which was a little bit cheeky, and I think it was really nice. In 2018, the president delivered his 56th independence anniversary speech. And we just ran through it, and I could remember almost every paragraph. Then I discovered that the guys had actually recycled the president's speech of the previous year for the next year's independence. Completely. Somebody who is paid, is hired, is paid by taxpayers, is a presidential speech writer. But in 1 year, they can't write a fresh speech for the president for independence anniversary. And they go back and pick the old template and change the date and give it to the president. And the president actually reads it in this country, 2018. The day we were running the story in the night, the presidential speech writer called me and said, Tabu, this is going to jeopardize my job. Please, just hold the story. We know we made a mistake, and so on. I said, you know, the safe bet for you right now is you tell the president that you recycled the speech because the story is going to be in the paper tomorrow. And you don't want him to read it in the paper before you alert him. And that's exactly what she did. That's probably why she still has her job. But it's just some simple forms of accountability, which means you must have very good memory. You must remember what happened in the past to be able to know whether what is happening now is related or different, or if there's some question you need to ask, right? Now, in terms of tracking the political pledges, obviously, most people go to office on the basis of a manifesto. And the manifesto is a package of promises that should be binding, at least in the liberal political theory of democracy, between the elected and the electors. And so when these people come to office, there's an expectation, or indeed anticipation, that they will be able to fulfill the things they have promised to do. So how do you then do political tracking? The first one is obviously to look at the manifesto of the candidate, or of the candidates. That's the starting point. One of the projects we had for our election coverage was actually an analysis of the different manifestos of the candidates, presidential candidates particularly. But this should happen even to the lowest levels. The LC1 chairperson, He's going to be making promises. He might say, our village will be a lot more secure if you elect me. And if you elect the guy, and within 4 months, there are 6 residents who have been killed in very unclear circumstances, then you go back to the pledge. So this is what they said in this year. This is what has happened, actually. So what are they saying about it now? And you see what is the relationship between what they promised and what they're saying when in office. So reading manifestos is very important, and keeping a copy is more important because you're going to use this in the next 5 years, at least in a Ugandan context. In other countries, it will be 7 years. You might not be able to remember all the facts in a manifesto if you don't have a copy, right? So if somebody comes back and says, you know, I'm going to make sure that Ugandans will be safe, secure, and then you have insecurity in parts of the country. Then you need to go back and ask them. So, sir or madam, this is what you promised. This is what's happening. What do you say about it now? What's your explanation for that, right? So asking the questions to hold the powerful to account, but also to hold the powerless to account. I think there's a presumption in the conversations that the powerless people have no accountability, which I disagree with, right? I think everyone should be accountable. And this accountability can even be in your workplace, if you're an editor, right? So you say we're going to do independent journalism, and the first 2 things you do in your office time is to kill stories because, you know, they're sort of either too hot, the pressure is too much, or someone has paid you money to kill it. Are you still being accountable as an editor? And can you actually superintend a newsroom that does accountability journalism if you're not accountable yourself as the editor? So this is not a question for politicians, really. I think sort of kind of life audit of ourselves, of our profession, of our career, and of our associations with different people. And political, why political tracking is more important is because, first of all, by putting certain people in office to do certain things on your behalf, you surrender part of your rights to them, right? So you presume that they should use those rights to achieve the best interest of you as the elector. The second is you also give them power and then to make decisions, including legislation and allocation or mobilization of resources. And where do they deploy them? Those decisions are very important because it actually underlines what quality of service you will receive or not receive. So the question of legislation is important because laws, although I don't know if there's a lawyer in this room, there's a way people have tended to portray law as the best thing that has ever happened. But law, in some respect, is conscription of consent. Because even before you are born, certain laws have been made. And when you're born, you must respect the law. But your consent has really not been sought for this particular law. Some people sat somewhere on your behalf, made the laws, so you must abide by them. So if you elect people in office, and then the first thing they do is to make a legislation that grants political or waiver for political crimes in the country, right? For themselves, basically, for corruption and stuff like that. Essentially, they're trying to create for them a safe territory where to operate, which might be a contradiction of what they promised, you know, in their own manifestos. And you therefore need to watch the words and watch the action and see whether they match, or if they don't match, ask the question for explanations or for reversal. And many times these things, they actually result in really very progressive actions. Most of the time, when accountability journalism is done to the dot, whether at the city hall or at parliament or at the local council, one village, or just medicine. Just go to a health center. You promise that we'll have the best health care. Go to the public health care and ask. If you have a situation where patients go and they have to go and buy medicines at the nearest pharmacy, right? So is that the best health care which was promised? Where is the medicine? Where are the doctors? Where are the nurses? There has been promise in this country over and over for doctors, pay raise. Pay raise. And we are almost having an annual right of doctor strikes in this country. It's a very serious problem. One part of accountability journalism is really, you know, tracking the promise and say, this is what you promised, this is what is it, now we're in the strike, what did you say this? The other is actually to just raise the fundamental question, is this constituency-based lobby for pay raise the right thing for the country, right? Or should we have a national salary review commission that sort of regularizes the pay for everybody in public service, right? Because if you pay doctors a lot more money, if the doctors succeed today, right, as I heard they're about to succeed, then you are going to create disharmony among health professionals, the clinicians, the nurses, and everyone else who works together with doctors will say, but no, we also want X, Y, Z, right? So you have not solved the problem. You have pretended to solve the problem with the doctors, but you have created new problems. Because can the doctors work without the nurses? Can they work without the clinicians? If you won't solve the problem, how do you solve it? By dealing with everybody in the same way. So the point for me would be an accountability journalism that then broadens the conversation from the narrower prism of doctors' demand for better working conditions and pay to the broader questions of regularizing the remuneration for all public servants. Right? So that was one way of looking at it. Of course, there will be people who dissent to that proposition, and they're right, as long as there's justification for those positions. So what will be the role of a newsroom, or indeed of a journalist, in ensuring accountability journalism thrives? As I said, the first one is by being accountable yourself. Do not preach wine and drink water. Right? So be accountable. If you don't want politicians to be corrupt, don't be corrupt. Yeah, it's simple. You cannot have a different standard for other people in terms of integrity, and you lower the guard for yourself to have your own comfort. The selfishness just doesn't make sense, right? So first thing, be accountable in terms of integrity, in terms of the promises you make. If you have editorial values, editorial policy, make sure you follow those things, because the commitment, it's your Bible, it's your contract with the public. It's the expectation that when they read your content or watch your content, that you actually are doing so in line with the promises you have made in the editorial policy statement, right? So this is important for every practitioner in the media, that we should be what we ask of others. We should be what we ask of others. Two, we have platform. So we have power. So we have a power either as a presenter, as a reporter, or as an editor. I actually miss my reporter days a lot more. I think I was more powerful as a reporter than now as a managing editor. When I was a reporter, I was really powerful. Now I get complaints of I get calls of complaints and all those kind of things. But as a reporter, the byline is hugely important. It's a huge asset for a journalist. And that's why I still smuggle my way to write stories, because I think that without a byline, I am dying professionally. Sitting at the desk is decay, which is why I have the most gray hair now. If somebody can give me a job to be a reporter and pay me some good money, I am happy to go and do that. Like seriously. I will travel a lot. I will meet people who are really very intelligent and have conversations with them and gain knowledge without paying tuition. Right? Fantastic stuff. That's why I think the reporter is a very important person. I think he's the most important person in our entire structure of journalism. The editor may stop a story, may slant a story, may guide on this, but you know, the first editing is by a reporter. You can come from the field and give me 50% of what you actually know from the field. How will I know that you know? I wouldn't, right? So from the source is where the most important action happens. And for those of you who are reporters, please use that properly and professionally. It's hugely important. So use the platform you have to create memory. So have accurate record of things. For you to create a proper memory, you should have accurate record. Accurate. Right? Because that's what you're going to use for asking the next question. In 2 years, in 5 years, in 10 years. Right? You need to be key that your current record is accurate. Two, now technology allows a multiplicity of platforms, either for content generation or information storage. Secure all your information. Build a data bank. Behave as if you're going to write a book, and you need to assemble all the smaller ingredients now. Most people who write books look at these things cumulatively. You just don't wake up one morning after 50 years in journalism and you say, I want to write a book, and then you don't have a notepad of the past years. It doesn't work like that, right? Your own sense of organization is important to position you with knowledge. That's important to ask accountability questions, right? The other one is institutional memory. For people who have served for a long time, they know many things off the cuff, right? So they can remember that this is actually what happened in the CA debate. But this is what is happening with the constitutional amendment. This is what somebody said during the CA debate. But this is what they're saying now. So they can reproduce what the person said 10 years apart. So it also means somehow we have to be in this trade for much longer. I don't know what the average age of the people, Jan, that you have invited here in practice is. Whether it's 5 years, it's 3 years, it's 10 years, 20 years. But if you have come to the scene now, there's a likelihood that there are things that happened in the past whose grasp you may not have. That's not your fault, right? But the longer you stay in this trade, the more contacts you build, and I was discussing this with Chigundu a short while ago, that there's a benefit of dinosaurs in the newsroom. The people who have stayed there for long hold some kind of institutional memory, right? If a fire accident happens now, a main fire accident happens in town, they can go back and say, 12 years ago there was a fire accident, government promised to do X, Y, Z, yeah, in terms of granting safety in public spaces in regard to fire accidents. Where is it? There was a report of so-and-so. Where is that report now? Was it acted upon, right? But you can't ask those questions if you don't have the base knowledge. So accountability journalism thrives on base knowledge. It doesn't thrive in the air or by assumption. No. No, you should know things which places you in the right position to ask the questions. You just don't ask questions because you've been given an opportunity to ask questions. You ask questions because you know what you're talking about, right? So this is important, that we need to have a base knowledge. That also then means we must read widely. There are things that may have happened before you were born or before you got into profession, but nothing limits you in knowing them if you take interest to read broadly, and you'll be able to stumble or unravel things even people who have been there much longer than you don't know. So in terms of tracking the political promises, it's important to tabulate what were the promises. What is the current status of delivery? What are the explanations for this? Where do we go from here? Can this person be believed? Was it their fault it did not happen? Because certain things can happen because of acts of nature. So you plan to do something which is outside of your control, and then happens. And so there's a logical explanation for why certain things are not delivered, right? It's not that if I promise I'm going to marry you next year, and I don't marry you, that I'm a liar, right? So I could have a very good explanation. Maybe I lost my parents in between, so that destabilized our family, and I have to reorganize myself, right? Or maybe I got a study scholarship opportunity. I was abroad, so I could not, right? Marry somebody when I was also married to education. So it is important that we have, it's not yellow journalism, going after people, right? You are seeking credible explanations and answers to things that have not happened, and you're trying to hold people to account for their promises. And I think that is a core of it. There's a perception sometimes that accountability journalism should be aggressive. The aggressiveness is not in terms of physical fierceness, right? The aggressiveness is really the boldness, the steeliness which is involved in how you pursue these things. I told you that, I don't know how to speak with a microphone, and you can see I'm having a lot of struggle, having to balance the microphone and my own gestures. But the most important thing when pursuing accountability journalism is facts. Facts. What are the facts you know? What are the facts you can verify? How are you counter-checking claims people are making in public space? Right? Somebody says, I'm going to pay doctors $5 million if you elect me as a president. $5 million, how many doctors do we have? How much money have they proposed in the budget, in their manifesto, for health? And if you paid doctors at $5 million per person, would it gobble up the whole cash? Or would you have substantial money for infrastructure development, for operations, for salaries, and the rest of it, right? So also asking the question, how feasible are promises? So promises can sound like really great. And we did this, I think, when somebody said they were going to pay the least person in security $1 million shillings per month. 1 million shillings per month times about 100,000, yeah? 100,000 people, prisons, police, army, and if you add intelligence agencies, even much higher than that. How much money will it be? And over a year, right? So when we actually did the audit, one of the persons on the team said, but you guys, what are you doing like this? Because you see, our guy is trying to get votes, but you're running him down. I said, no, we're just trying to test, is this feasible, right? It's accountability, we're just asking the questions. If somebody said, I am going to be an editor and I'll pay you 10 million shillings as a reporter, you want to, maybe it will interest you to know how much are the other reporters being paid. What is the financial health of this institution? Right? So the reality is now, what's the financial health? Is there anyone who has been paid 10 million before? Right? If you are paid 10 million and the information is known, what will happen to that institution? I'm not saying it will not happen. It could happen. I mean, you could be paid 10 million, but you might actually be the source of total instability in the institution. Right? And then the implementation of that promise will become difficult because there will be riots all over by all the other staff. Either you or you and the one who gave you the 10 million will leave for the peace of the institution. So questions of, is this practicable? Can it work? Right? It's an accountability question. Can this work? Is this promise real? Is it just for the public gallery? Right? So the thing about accountability journalism, which is what essentially all journalism is presumed to be, right? Because everybody who practices journalism, at least the ones I've had, say my job is to hold the powerful to account. Right? But there are also other forms of journalism which are really not about accountability. They could be about anything else. We all know what they could be for. So for us who are recruiting ourselves to do accountability journalism, and you should also know that there are high risks in this kind of things. There are very high risks in accountability journalism because people who have not delivered on their commitments don't want to be asked, first thing. The second is sometimes they have not delivered because they've diverted the resources. So they have benefited individually from the failure to provide public service. And they're not going to take it kindly when you go and dig up their mess. And what happens with these situations is one of two. They will offer you money initially. I think now in this town it's become almost a common thing that they will say, please, can I talk to you man to man? I don't know if there are those who say, can I talk to you woman to woman? But I've heard more about, can we talk man to man? And drop the story, we will somehow pay you. Right? So you forget about the story. Right? This is temptation. You see, the people who wrote the Bible said, do not lead him or her into temptation. And people need to be very clear. And this is why I was saying, ask of others what you are. Right? Because you are more likely to submit to the temptation. And then you kill the wishes and the wills of the many people that you should fight for or defend as a journalist. So it's abuse of power, really. So you take a bribe to kill a story, you're abusing the power of journalism. Right? That's the first thing. The second is they will either run a smear campaign against you or try to go after you, whichever way they can. Right? Particularly if big money is involved. Whether it's going to be in the corporate world or it's going to be in the political world. And for newsrooms, the biggest terrorists are advertisers. It's not even the state. In this country, the biggest threat to independent journalism is commercial interest. Why? Because the revenue base of most media houses is very narrow. So if a big advertiser threatens to pull out adverts, the executives will run and remove their neckties and they'll run down the stairs and try to see how can we salvage the situation. It's the reality in this country. You are seeing a lot more people being beaten by police and military on the streets, which is terrible torture, but you're not seeing the commercial whips because they're invisible. You don't see them. And nobody holds that conversation because it does not benefit the parties. The advertiser gains if they kill a story, and the media house gets advert money. So everybody is benefiting in that arrangement. In the case of beating of journalists on the streets, the journalists suffer, so that's why there's noise. So there's a mutual corruption in corporate media between advertisers and media entrepreneurs. It's a big problem. And I've always asked the question, if a media house thinks it's okay in business interest, in commercial interest, to drop a story, why isn't it okay for a journalist also in his commercial interest or her commercial interest to drop a story? What's the difference between the sins? What's the difference? Yeah? So this is why I'm saying, if we want to hold people accountable, we should be accountable, and it must be across the board. As individual journalists, as the institutions that are media houses, and then our interface in the public spaces. So this is the kind of accountability I'm talking about. That accountability journalism cannot thrive if the practitioners are not accountable themselves. If the media houses are not accountable themselves, right? We need to track and ask the most important questions, but we should approach that with integrity and with sincerity and with honesty and be sure that our facts are correct at all material times and make amends when we get it wrong, which is what we do. One of the biggest disasters ever in my life as a journalist, and then of course as an editor, is last week we published an interview which was done with the KCCA Deputy Executive Director. For some reason in the processing of that interview, it ended up with the KCCA Executive Director, not the Deputy. Yeah? We did an interview with the Deputy Executive Director of KCCA. In the processing and final printout in the paper, the next day, I saw it had moved from Deputy Executive Director to the Executive Director. It's the biggest disaster ever that I have seen in my life in the newsroom. That somehow interview done with you is ascribed to your supervisor. Right? And when I follow the process, of course, now I know internally where it happened. But as part of accountability, we had to reprint that same interview and make the right attribution and use the right images of the Deputy Executive Director. Now here's the drama about it. So the day we published the interview, and I was obviously very nervous, angry, and everything else, then actually the KCC Executive Director says this interview is fine, so there's no need to reprint it, even if I was not the one who did it. But now that you have ascribed it to me, it's okay, this is fine. Our biggest battle was how not to reprint that interview, because now KCA people, we are now, the executive director at least was very happy. Because I think the deputy said very intelligible things. So it was okay. Then they were saying us, you see, if you reprint this thing, you're going to cause, people might think there's this problem with KCCA, right? I told them, you see, I have an obligation to set the correct account of things, right? Whether or not you people at City Hall agree with our position, first of all, I apologize, for this terrible error that happened, but we're going to reprint this interview. And I can tell you, I had a phone conversation as late as, I think, 8:30 with the executive director, who was still saying, we have agreed with the deputy that there's no need to reprint the interview. So, the work we do sometimes is a reference for scholarly work, right? People quote things in the media, in their other works, for strategy, for policy, and it is just wrong that somehow an interview done with the deputy ED will end up as the knowledge, as the thoughts of the supervisor. And that the institution was actually happy. That's how it should remain, right? So we reprinted it as a part of our accountability system, right? To have the correct account. That's why I'm saying accountability is not just about the politicians. That is important. It is important because of why we elect them. But the more important bit is you must always also be accountable, right? The last element I'll say about this before I open it up for any questions, if the time is there, because I also need to run away, is really the question of should we have this conversation about accountability journalism narrowed to tracking political pledges? Now, for me, of course, this is a question to the organizers. There's obviously a reason why they focus on the politics of accountability journalism rather than the breadth of accountability journalism, because really the hard questions need to be asked in all spaces. And I can understand, as I said, because elections are periodic and candidates are elected on the basis of their manifesto promises that they make therein, it's good to follow up year on year and within the 5 years and say, this is what you promised to improve in agriculture. You said you supply tractors. How many tractors do we have? How many groups have benefited? Have they gone on to all the minister's farm? Have you actually sold them off the market after importing them? Those questions are important to ask, right? How I'm going to improve security. Maybe the state has killed many more people within the 5 years than it has ever done in the previous 5 years. And accountability questions arise there, right? Roads. You say the roads will now be very smooth. You can even put your cup of tea and you drive to a road. Nothing will happen on the road. Then you find that between Karuma and Oluyo, you must take 3 hours because you're trying to get the road from the potholes, right? So you can ask those questions. I saw somebody, I think it was even the Observer. The Observer just published pictures of how the road between, and this new road done by the Chinese, big lawn put there. But it's broken for 40 kilometers. You can hardly drive. And as soon as they did that, I saw UNRWA saying, no, our guys have come to the site, there's a maintenance. Did they see the road broken before Observer put the pictures? Of course they did. But because they know the power of the media, then they respond to it. One of the stories we did, I think yesterday, we did a story for which I think some people should be in jail. They should really be in jail. So Uganda signs, some officials of Uganda on behalf of the Republic of Uganda sign a deal with China for $200 million for expansion and upgrading the international airport in Entebbe. What do? They said us, the obligor, who is the person who in law undertakes an obligation in a contract or agreement, waive all immunity, sovereign or otherwise, including for the property of the Republic of Uganda, to China. To China. It's in writing and signed. I said, even if the people were deranged, they will still see those words and say there's trouble. And guess what? They actually signed it in 2015. Which essentially means that no sovereign asset of Uganda is immune to attachment by China if we defaulted on paying the 200 million. How can this happen? It's public officials signing off the crown of Uganda for 200 million. How different are those guys, are they from the people who sold, I think, Jesus in some game? Right? What's the difference? How can you, and they said any dispute arising from that agreement will be resolved only in China and in Beijing. Actually, they said Beijing specifically, not any part of China, in Beijing. And on the basis of the laws of China. Signed. What's the level of accountability of our officials? Yeah. So, and this is actually even more dramatic. Now, as we speak, the budget, the management plan, and the strategic plan of Uganda Civil Aviation Authority is approved from Beijing. Yeah. The budget, the management plan, and the strategic plan of Uganda Civil Aviation Authority is approved from Beijing because of that agreement. And two, they have established an escrow account, so an account managed by a third party. Yeah? For Uganda Civil Aviation Authority, the money it raises goes to the escrow account. That money cannot be used unless authorized by China. And the people who signed those agreements are still driving in government cars and eating sausage in offices here in this country. Yeah. is our country. This is exactly what has happened. When we did this story yesterday, for us it was an accountability question, right? What is somebody employed to do? What have they done? What are the ramifications of what they've done? And where should they be? And I'm actually surprised that other than the page being shared on social media, that's it. That's it. The level of civic activism for me is very depressing. Those people who signed that contract should be in jail. They should be in jail, not here. But that's what has happened. So, if we fail to pay, well, I heard Matia Kasaija saying that the central government will step in. If we fail to pay, they will somehow pay the money. But whether or not we're paying that money, what they have done is just out of the world. I've never seen for $200 million that you sign off the sovereignty of the state. Go, come take what you want. What if we fail, the guys say we're coming to attach state house, what happens? Because that's a sovereign asset. If they say they're going to take Uganda house in New York, what happens? Because you've waived the immunity. Yeah? If they say we want the parliament, or we want the airport, what happens? Because there's national security implications in this agreement. Because you have now exposed all of Uganda's sovereign assets to some lender for $200 million. So it is important as part of accountability journalism, and now I think even more important with what has happened with this particular agreement, that we sort of scrutinize all the loans we have borrowed, we have picked from people. What have you staked? What has Uganda staked for the money it's got, whether from IMF, from World Bank, from China, or other bilateral or multilateral lender? And if we just picked out the things Uganda has staked for the different loans, we might actually find that we don't own anything now, because everything somehow is now a collateral for some loan. Yeah? It's accountability journalism. Yeah? We can ask and say, can we account for what we have staked? That's one element. The second is, can we account for where we have put the money we have borrowed? So we borrowed money for roads. For this particular road, it's now 5 years. Why is the road not built? You have had the money. And there's a lot of money like that. Money which is borrowed and is not absorbed, so it sits there, accumulating interest. So we start paying interest even before we use the money we have borrowed. It's happening. Accountability journalism could just inquire into that specific one and say, how much money have we borrowed that's just sitting idle and for which we're paying interest? And the road we promised or we borrowed the money for is even broken. So you haven't solved the problem, you've created a new problem, you're incurring more costs. It's just basic accountability journalism. So that's why I'm saying, beyond the political, there's a lot of area for enterprise and application of accountability journalism. Jan, I think I can stop there unless you have an objection as the host. Sorry? I can explain why we chose. Okay. Yeah.
In the context of reporting about elections, I think the last 2 years, we are seeing a repeat of some of the pledges being made sometimes, and there was a tracking that showed that not quite little work was done actually to pursue these stories. But now that we know, we have at least 5 years. If a journalist is really keen and a media house is really keen, this can be a special project that they can run with. And then, of course, accountability journalism benefits in the context that what they have learned in one area can actually spill over in others. And like you say, it's not just a presidential commitment. Sometimes the local governments, they have budgets that we never look at that are very critical, and yet we only report them about maybe 1 year into the next election. And they have really nothing much to, there's really not, even despite the fact that you've gotten so much information, you really can't hold them to account. But if we start now, it's possible that there's some kind of fear of God that can return to address this impunity, especially by leaders.
You said fear of God, and that's very interesting in this country, because I think by statistics, Anywhere up to 95% of people Ugandans profess some faith. But also we have the worst, we rank really very terribly on the corruption perception index. Is there something that is related to professing a faith or being closer to God and being corrupt? I don't know. But that can be a subject of academic inquiry. Any questions, anything I need to clarify on before I run away?
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask, the monitor used to give us the faces. I remember when Kaseja was in Parliament, he said there is a person, a technical person, who signed or who negotiated on our behalf. And I thought if that story had brought us maybe that face and maybe the properties they own and all that, maybe we would have, but I wanted to ask a question. Yeah. Yes, no, I was saying as another angle, which you could have, maybe, I read the story in the night, I reread, and I felt I was like a bit angry, but I was asking, who are these people signing? And for me, unless we see the faces, because sometimes we keep in the middle, as you are saying, and it all goes, but you could find some person is owning all these buildings, and these are the simple people who walk on the streets. Sometimes we think the people who sign are the ministers, but they are technical guys, quiet, they hold the power, and they misuse. I wanted to ask, at Nation Media Group, as you do this, Jan has talked about local governments. You have sort of kept at the top, at the center, but the local governments are the implementers. And if you have seen Minister, the Minister of the Presidency in charge of economic monitoring, Ogwang. He's tried to expose a few things, but the media is not picking up. So I don't know what happens since you are a managing editor. How can we see this at the local level so that we have more accountability? Thanks.
I think when I was starting this presentation, I did raise the issue that this is not just about at the highest levels of politics. It permeates to the local council one. That's what I said, local council one. Part of the reason why that's important is Uganda has a decentralization policy, so there's a lot of money which is flowing from the center to the municipalities, cities, and local governments, and that goes to sub-counties and to villages. So it's important to see how much money has come in a month, where is it being applied, who is pretending it, what is the quality of the service being delivered. That audit needs to happen, both as a civic responsibility, but also as a media responsibility. And we do cover this, including, of course, the visits with visits that Minister Gwang is making. There's a principle which I find very important as an editor, that publish that you can defend. We hear so many things and we know so many things, but can you defend it? So we're doing some work around the first question you raised, who was who played what role in this agreement, right? And we're still looking for the documents, right? Because this is what you need to write when you have the document and you can have the comfort to put somebody's face, right? This is what we're doing. And I've had conversations, tough conversations sometimes with the Dude. The Dude knows too many things in his head. But when you ask them, okay, so if we publish this, how do we defend it? Then he will say, okay, let me first talk to you later. And he never gets back until you have the next conversation. But the principle is that when we are doing our journalism, we need to assemble the correct evidence to defend our work. Because you know that when you publish this story, people are going to come after you. And you don't want to arm your enemies by creating lapses in the information gathering process. And never publish and then start looking for the evidence. It will not happen. Never, and this is what many journalists overlook. Somebody will tell you, no, you read, you just run the story. I'm going to give you the documents tomorrow. Tell them, give the document now, the story will run tomorrow. Or you give the documents tomorrow, the story will run on that day or the next day. Because if you run the story and they don't give you the document, and somebody goes to court, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Because the media house can pay those legal costs and so on, but what if that expense was introduced in your pocket, as our lawyer likes to ask it? So we have a fantastic lawyer, very bold guy, James Nangwala. He will defend you on every story as long as you have the evidence. And he tells you, you have a responsibility to provide evidence for me as the lawyer to go and argue your case. Don't run a story and then you say, we're still looking for the evidence. Because court does not wait for when you are going to get the evidence to make a judgment. Because this accountability journal is a tough job and it's very risky. Make sure you assemble everything, every fact, as you should have it before you publish.
We have friends that have been watching online. And questions here from Felix Warom to everyone. Felix Warom, a couple of comments here. And you agree, very true, advertising is killing tenets of journalism. So how can we newsroom safeguard the intrusion by advertising to maintain good journalism? But it's very true also what Francis agrees. Munira Suwed says, how can media houses then safeguard from advertising? Catherine Napalat, accountability journalism, very important aspect of journalism, and yet with many small media houses, such is not enforced. I think the major questions here, how do we safeguard and how do we go about it by the fact that we agree that advertisers influence media?
So Alex and Chigundu will deal with those questions of media viability and so on and so forth. Me, I will deal with the frontline issues as they experience it, right? So in the newsroom, in the media house, now we have different departments. So commercial, the guys who bring the money, so they go and talk to the advertisers and they get big money. The MD at the top, who is the chief executive, and is balancing all of those forces. And then us who are editors and news guys and the editorial who are causing all the trouble. Now, this is what I tell them, right? The issue you have raised about the advertiser's interest is very important, right? But the story that we are going to write is very important. So let everybody do their job. The reason why I am not looking for money is because I'm writing stories. So in other words, my job is to cause all of the trouble that you can get around, but somehow for you must go and look for the money, including from those people for which we are causing trouble. So let everybody do their job. Because nobody, I'm not lying about this, no one is going to advertise in a newspaper or on a radio or on a TV which doesn't have strong editorial content. If you think I'm lying, go and start a media house and just run adverts and see what will happen. So the commercial person who is essentially telling you to drop a story for the advertiser's interest is killing him or herself. Because when the news collapses, when the editorial content collapses, there'll be no more advertising. So they're committing suicide. And you need to explain this to them at every level. For that reason, I'm very unpopular, really, with people in the commercial, but I really don't have apologies for that because I'm doing my work.
Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Tabu Tajira, Nation Media Group Managing Editor for Uganda. Thank you very much for your insight. Quite brilliant. And I do believe at the back of your minds there is lots of questions, but you cannot ask them. You do that later if time permits, but I know why you're not asking them. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for breakfast. Please get on your feet. Let's come and let's get served. It's a working breakfast. Go back to your table with your serve, and then we can be able to catch up with time for the next sessions that are coming through. Please show some interest. Breakfast is here. Our friends online, please stay there. We will also still give you some breakfast. I don't know how we can do that. Hashtag Uganda Media Week 21, the second hashtag hashtag Media Week 21, and then Media Matters UG. On YouTube, we are streaming live as well. Catch up with us. Media Focus on Africa, Facebook Media Focus on Africa, and Twitter at MFA Uganda. It is the Uganda Media Week 2021, day 2, and it could be our conclusion. We are trying to get some answers here. Navigating obstacles in Uganda's journalism. How can that be achieved, and how can we be able to do that? And as we just had our open discussion with the Nation Media Group Managing Editor for Uganda, Tabu Mutajira. And of course, the subject and discussion was about accountability journalism, the road to 2026, tracking the political pledges. As we also know very well that politicians make a lot of pledges. But as journalists, have we taken it upon ourselves to ensure that all these pledges are in play or are in place? That is the main concern. As our next session, as we prepare for the same, we'll be focusing on closing the digital divide. Beyond that, increasing access, rural urban women, and persons with disabilities. And just to join us, we'll be expecting Clinton Tumanye, who is the communications officer. That's at Vijana Corps. Noah Omuyas, the CEO. AICA Media, Simon Eruku. Team leader, Open Science Impact Innovations Limited. Also expected is Ronald Rachigumba, Inclusive Digital Economy Consultant at UNCDF. Later stage as well, in pursuit of quality journalism, online publications is a very, very interesting subject that we'll be discussing. Watch out for the same. And before the close of the door, how journalists are overcoming challenges in post-COVID work. Our presentations will be in line with the same. Before the close of the day as well, we're looking forward to digital business models for building resilience and quality journalism. That will be an online session. And it will be still something that you will be looking forward to. As we take it's not a break in particular, but we are having a working breakfast. That means in a jiffy, we'll be getting back.
Excellence. First to the finest whiskey in the world, to the number one, that's Johnny Walker. And then the finest artist in the world, we have the best in East Africa, that's Isaac Atumwa. who is telling the Ugandan story to the world. We have Angelique Kijo, who is one of the best talents that we have in Africa. Then we have one of the best in entertainment, and of course, just